So, the question at root is because people say that Islam expanded by sword or Sufi or conversions. If it is not the case, then how did Islam become such an important force and such a massive force in terms of the sheer number of people that practice that religion? How did Islam actually happen in that region?
This was the big question, of course, which I was trying to answer. Exactly. Well, to answer that, I went into the field, into the Mofassal, the backwoods of Bengal, mainly Bangladesh, but parts of West Bengal too. But I was interested in getting my hands on, and I was lucky, I got my hands on Persian documents dating back to the 1600s, which documented the transfer of jungle land to pioneers. And these pioneers were, the Mughal government was trying to develop the land because they wanted revenue. The Mughals, it's important to always remember, were interested in three things: stability, revenue, and loyalty. They don't care about religion, but they want stability, revenue, and loyalty. And so to do that, they need to cut the jungle, transform the jungle into rice paddy, and then tax it. And you see this happening in the tax records of the Mughals, how the amount of taxation coming out of eastern Bengal increases as you move from the 1600s to the 1700s. And West Bengal declines. And part of the reason for that is the whole river phenomenon I just spoke of. But the broader point is that the Mughals were interested in developing the land, and so they were giving land grants to pioneers who were required to cut a certain segment of jungle using local labor. They had to mobilize the labor and pay the labor. And they also had to build a temple or a mosque. If the pioneer were a Hindu, he builds a temple, a little mandir. If the pioneer is a Muslim, he builds a masjid. Why? Again, the Mughals don't care about religion, but they do want stability. And they know that if there is a temple or a mosque, that will serve kind of like a nucleus that will hold the community together. And so, and you see this in every one of these documents. The recipient of a land grant is required to, they locate where the land is. The condition is you have to mobilize the labor. You have to bring the land into cultivation, which will be tax-free for the first number of years. And you have to build a temple or a mosque. Now it happened that most of these pioneers were Muslim. Therefore, most of the structures that were built on these land grant areas happen to be mosques. I think that's the key, because what that meant was that the first scripturally based religion that these people encountered was either the scriptures of the Brahmins or the scriptures of the Muslims, the Quran, the Hadith, and so forth. It was brought in. The mosque was where these scriptures were patronized, and they become the nucleus of these new communities. So the point is that over time, not only the land was changed from jungle to rice paddy, but the population was gradually changed from tribal local cults to Islam or Hinduism.
Could somebody argue that it was a certain kind of bias through which these land grants were given to Muslims because they were Muslim rulers, and that indirectly leads to the Islamization, because the pioneer builds a mosque and then that mosque teaches the religion. People, because people are getting all the laborers and everybody, they're getting access to the resources, money to work through that institution, and that institution itself is can somebody make that claim?
You could make the claim, but the problem is there's no evidence to support the claim. The evidence we have is that the Hindus had taboos against manual labor. That is, the people who were, by definition, a higher caste, whereas the Muslims did not have that taboo. The Pandus, therefore, there were more Muslims available to be pioneers. But you're quite right. That's an argument that one could use.
But also the question, Dr. Eaton, who are these original pioneers? Are they...
Right.
What is their origin?
Multiple origins. Some of them had titles like Chowdhury, which means they were already landlords of some kind, right?
So are they converted Muslims, or are they Muslims coming from, Turkey, Mongol, these regions? Who are they? What is the origin of these pioneers?
The names, we do have the names, but we do not have the biographies. So I cannot tell you where they came from. But what I can tell you is, from the name, you know whether they are Hindu or Muslim. You also know whether they are from what I would call kind of the pious gentry, like Haji. They would have titles like that, Sheikh, so-and-so, or Chowdhury, as I said. So some of them were religious figures, others were secular landlords in this case. So you have a mixture of people who were these pioneers. And the way in which their land grant system worked was also complex. In some cases, you had pioneers who went into the jungle, brought the land into cultivation, and then appealed to the government to give them a grant after they've already done all these things. You have other pioneers who are first given the grant, and then they go into the jungle, and they mobilize the populations, and they bring the land into cultivation after having received the grant. So there's different ways that this works. But the important point, I think, is that in every case, the land was transformed, local labor was mobilized in ways that had never happened before. A religious structure, usually a mosque, was built. And these mosques are not beautiful, marble or stone or even brick structures. They're made of bamboo and thatching. Very simple. So they don't exist today. They're all perishable. And that's an important point, because when I went into this project, when I heard the word masjid, I was thinking of some grand edifice with proper architecture. What I discovered was, and I discovered it by looking at some of the diagrams that are part of these land grants. They would actually show you a picture of the mosque or the temple. And they were not at all spectacular architectural monuments. They were very simple, bamboo and thatching. So that was the solution to another problem I had, which was, if most of the dated mosques are in the West, why then are most of the Muslims in the East? And the solution was that the mosques we're talking about, that were critical in this process, were not the great monuments that were dated, that have a stone with an inscription on it. Those are mainly in the western part of the delta. And the eastern delta doesn't have as many of those kinds of mosques, but it does have thousands and thousands of these more humble, simple structures. And they were the ones that seem to have played the pivotal role. They don't exist today.
So how long was this process? So somebody thinks that, okay, this is happening, the grant is given, a military commander or a land that would go there, and then they would start working on, proselytizing community taking the economic benefit from whatever labor they're contributing. I mean, this is also people what they say, but you talk about gradualism. You talk
Very
about the
gradual.
idea of this is not like an imposition. It's
No,
like
no.
How does that happen?
Well, it happens very subtly because, these pioneers were not necessarily themselves pious or religious, but they were required to build a mosque. That means they hired an imam and a muezzin, and there would be a qazi, and you have all these institutional affiliated with the mosque. But the pioneer was not necessarily affiliated with the mosque. He just built it. His job was to establish the mosque.
Why could it not have happened that the local tribal religious whatever center was there, it would be built in a way, or it would be engaged in a way that the local tradition remains while the idea of economic...
Well, that's a very good question. The local tradition was not institutionalized. So we don't have structures and we don't have priesthood. So, see, Islam has the advantage of having a ready package where you have the law is already there, the Sharia, you have the mosque and all the institutions that go with the mosque, of course, the imam, the muezzin, the khatib. They're all part of it. They come with the mosque. The same with the temple. You have your functionaries in there, the Brahmin functionaries in the temple.
How does that contribute to this process?
Well,
how does that help?
It helped because it secured an institution that was fixed in space.
Stability.
You have that stability. Remember, one of the three things the Mughals wanted: stability,
economy,
revenue, and loyalty. Yeah, loyalty is important. The last sentence of every land grant would say, you must promise that you will pray for the long life of the empire. There's a de facto separation of religion and state. You must remember, the Mughals were not interested in religion. They absolutely were not. And that includes Aurangzeb. We'll come to him later.
Yes, we will.
But I just want to say that this is very important to bear in mind, that when we talk about the Mughals as being a Muslim dynasty, it's Muslim in a very narrow sense, that Babur was Muslim coming out of, Central Asia, and his successors were also Muslim. But over the course of time, they had assimilated themselves into Indian culture thoroughly, especially Rajput culture. So my point is that by the time Bengal becomes the frontier, which is the middle 1600s, it's already pretty late. That's Aurangzeb's time, right? I mean, it's true. Jahangir established what he called Jahangirnagar, which is Dhaka. But it was really after Jahangir, it was even after Shah Jahan, that we begin to see these changes taking place. So I guess the point I want to make is that the religion that was already there in Eastern Bengal did not have any structure to it. There was no cement. There was no priesthood. There was no book. There was no monuments that we know of. The folk religion was very diffuse, and therefore it had nothing to kind of hold it together. This is why the Mughals wanted to have a mosque or a temple in each of these land grants.
Because it was really difficult to control people in a way.
Control is very important, because frontiers anywhere are by definition turbulent and can always be. I mean, look at the Afghans. When they are expelled from Delhi, where do they go? They go to Eastern Bengal. I'm talking about the period of, right after Babur, and Humayun, who chases the Afghans all the way down the Gangetic Plain as far as Dhaka, So the frontier is an area that's by definition unruly. Just like out here in the West, the frontier has always been kind of hard to control. The Wild West.
How are people actually converting? Because of the education, because of the interaction, because
I believe that the word conversion is flawed. I don't think they were converting. Conversion connotes a conscious transformation. Yesterday I was that, today I am this. Now that's a kind of a 19th century Protestant model of religious change. You know, that idea of experiencing a complete and total and instantaneous transformation, which certainly does happen, you know, on an individual basis. But when we're talking about a whole society, what I see rather is a gradual transformation which could be documented both by the names for the deity and the names of people, personal names. People begin to adopt Persian or Arabic names. They give their children an Arabic name or Persian name. But it doesn't happen all at once. It happens over hundreds of years. That is to say, a society maybe only 10% have Arabic or Persian names. And then maybe after 100 years, maybe only 40%. And then maybe another 100 years, maybe 80%. So you can see a gradual increase in the relative number of Arabic and Persian personal names. And that reflects religious change, but it happens very slowly.
And what were the reasons for these people to accept Islam?
I think it's the same reason they accepted Hinduism, that the temple or the mosque provided a sense of stability and security in a society that was already mobile. I mean, hunters and fishermen are by definition moving around, whereas farmers are fixed in place. When you're farming land, you have to stay on that land, right? And so by transforming the land to rice paddy, you're now creating cultivators who can't move as easily as they could before. And that's a major transformation in their life, as well as this new religion. And I believe that the people made an association between the change of the land and the change of the religion. I say that because one of the things I noted about many of the Sufis or so-called Sufis of Bengal was that many of them were identified not only with transforming the society to Islam, but they were also associated with being the first farmer, the first cultivator, which means there's a memory of these people as coming in and transforming the land from something that had not been before, transforming it from jungle to rice paddy. So that memory, I think, is very significant. And many of these pioneers, who were not necessarily Sufis themselves, seem to have been retroactively identified as having been Sufis. And a mazar appears over the gravestone.
Because of the reverence that people had for them?
Yes, I think respect and reverence and veneration. There's a recognition that this person was an important person in transforming the land.
And that necessarily that person does not have to be Sufi in the traditional way that the word Sufism.
Exactly. I think that's a very good point. So I guess what I'm trying to say in a nutshell is that the rise of Islam, in my understanding, was almost a kind of byproduct of a larger transformation of both the land and the society and the economy. You could throw in politics too, because after all...
Which includes an empire, in a sense.
It was the Mughal government that was issuing the land grants. So they had to be there. So the Mughals did play a role by initiating the process of the land transformation.